What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 308 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. Today, I have another Thor book that I want to talk to you about. This is Thor Season 1 by Matthew Sturgis and Pepe Larraz. This is one of the original graphic novels that came out in 2011 or 2012, basically as a gateway point for different characters of the Marvel Universe, summing up their origin story in a nice, tidy, somewhat continuity-free graphic novel. Some of the Season 1 books felt like they could fit right in the Marvel Universe without really contradicting anything. Doctor Strange was a really good example of that. It felt like it took place in between two of the original issues of Strange Tales where Doctor Strange was originally appearing, but then a lot of the other books, they feel like they're more or less set in an alternate reality, how you don't really need to go and read the Silver Age stuff. You can just kind of take this as an updated and slightly altered version of the Silver Age stories. And this one is kind of like that. For example, in the first appearance of Thor in the Marvel Universe, he fought some rock monsters from Jupiter, I think. And in this, he does fight some rock monsters, but they're not from Jupiter. They are actually Nordic golems, I guess you could say, that are being controlled by Loki. And so you've got stuff that I'm assuming was in the Silver Age Thor run, and you've also got some stuff that's quite a bit more modern. For example, Loki being a child of the Frost Giants. I don't know when that idea worked its way into the Marvel Universe. I believe that is actually an element from Norse mythology, but I'm also fairly sure that in the original Silver Age stuff that Loki was actually Thor's brother, and it was only much later that someone else said, no, let's have him be a frost giant baby who was raised by Odin. So this is taking elements from the Silver Age stuff from the 60s, but it's also working in some of the newer concepts. When I was first reading this, the first 10 or 15 pages or so, I was thinking, oh no, this is another one of those Season 1 books that's basically regurgitating one of the movies. Spider-Man Season 1 was probably my least favorite of the Season 1 books because it felt like it was basically just retelling the story of the first Raimi Spider-Man movie, and also in a way it felt like it was kind of predating the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. And that's to be expected, and it's unfortunately something you can't really avoid because Spider-Man has a set origin story, and so there's really not much you can do to change that when you're retelling the origin story, especially, and Cullen Bunn is a writer I normally like, but he said that he was kind of handcuffed whenever he was writing that, and he had some really neat ideas that he wanted to do with that story, and they told him, no, you pretty much need to stick to the continuity that we already have. So that was one that I wasn't really too fond of, and I was afraid that we were going to get that here, because the opening scene with this book very much reminds me of one of the early scenes in the Thor movie, where they go to Jotunheim and more or less almost start a war, and then that's what kicks off Odin's schism with his son Thor, and that's what gets Thor banished to Earth. And that more or less is exactly what happens here, but then after that, everything else plays out differently in this book, and I was glad because there's a lot of stuff that you can pull from when doing a Thor origin story. You don't have to do exactly what the movie did, and I'm not sure if the movie came out before this or if this came out before the movie. I'm assuming that these guys at least had a pretty good idea of what was going to be happening in the movie, even if it hadn't come out yet when they were working on this. I'm pretty sure if the movie came out before this, that they were working on this before the movie came out anyway. But I like that they were able to at least start in a similar point that the movie started, but then go in a very different direction. Case in point, this book uses Donald Blake, who is I guess a false character. He's not real. Odin created Donald Blake as a persona for Thor to be trapped in so that he could learn humility, and that's also an idea that was not part of the original 60s Thor comics. Originally, Donald Blake was a real dude who found a cane, and then he would hit it against the wall, and then he would become Thor. And then over the years, I guess people like Roy Thomas, he said, I don't really like that. That kind of contradicts the original Norse mythology. Roy Thomas is a big fan of Norse mythology, so he would say, no, Donald Blake is actually a persona that I'm pretty sure it was Roy Thomas who came up with all that. I could be wrong. I know that Roy Thomas was the one who said the hammer is not called Uru. Uru is actually a metal that it's made of. It's actually called Mjolnir, because Stan Lee didn't really care about all the minutia from mythology, so he said, okay, the Thor's hammer is called Uru. And then Roy Thomas is like, no, in mythology it's called Mjolnir. So I know Roy Thomas was one of the guys who was trying to make the Thor of the Marvel Universe a lot more similar to the Thor of Norse mythology. And so I had it in my mind that he was the one who said that Donald Blake was not a real person, but I could be wrong. But that's another element that was not in the original Silver Age comics that is present here, where Donald Blake is very much wrestling with a sense of identity in this book. He doesn't doesn't know if he's real. And once he's kind of figured out that he is a creation, a fabrication that Odin created for Thor to be part of, once he's figured that out, he's not sure if he should be Thor or if he should be Donald Blake. It's very much the hero's choice that we see a lot of times in superhero movies. For example, in the first Spider-Man movie by Sam Raimi, or Batman Forever, or in The Dark Knight. And a lot of times we see this played out in, okay, you can save this person or you can save this person, and this one is a representation of your civilian life, and this one's a representation of your superhero life. We see that a lot in these hero's choice dilemmas, but here we don't have it as you can save these people or you can save this person, which I like. That's still the same hero's choice, but given to us in a much more fresh way. So I like that quite a bit, and I like that it doesn't have a cut and dried answer for should he be Donald Blake or should he be Thor. I kind of like that. Some people might look at that and say it's kind of a cop-out. I kind of liked it. This is another one of the Season 1 books that I would not mind having a sequel to, and I don't think they're ever going to do that, but I felt that way when I was reading Fantastic Four Season 1. That was one I really would have liked to have seen more of. This is another one that I would not mind seeing a Volume 2 to this book, because I really liked what we had here. I like the way Loki is presented here. It's a little similar to the movie, but just different enough that I like what they're doing here. Especially at the end of the book, I really like the way he feels conflicted. He's on his path to becoming the villain that we know from mythology and also from the comics, but he's not a 100% mustache-twirling villain. He does feel a little bit of... he feels sympathetic when something happens that was a little bit out of his control, and I like him for that. Also, the artwork in this book is fantastic. At times, it reminds me of Terry Dodson's artwork, and then at times, it reminds me of Oliver Copiel. And those two artists are not very similar at all. I would never say that Dodson and Copiel, I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I apologize. I don't think that they're very similar at all. I don't think that their styles are very similar, but there are times where I look at a panel and I'm thinking, that looks like it was drawn by Copiel. And then I go back to the credits page and it only has Pepe Larraz credited. So I'm thinking, I guess this is drawn by Pepe, but it looks very much like a Coipel page. And then there are times where I'm thinking, this looks very similar to Terry Dodson. So I like the style here. Those are both artists that I really like, and I'm very curious what else these guys, both Pepe and Matthew, have done, because I don't think I've read anything else by either of them. But I like this book quite a bit, and if they're this good on other things that they do, then I'm definitely going to be checking out some of the other things that they've done besides this book. So those are my brief thoughts on Thor Season 1. I hope that you guys liked this review, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of the day. Catch you later.